Hello there, and welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Dominaria. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, joined by these two consummate professionals, Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon, and it is our great pleasure to bring you coverage of the finals. Now, this one could be quick. You're not going to want to go anywhere. It's Gonçalo Pinto from Portugal playing against, from the United States, Wyatt Darby. The players are ready. The stage is set. Let's head on down. It's time for the finals here from Pro Tour Dominaria. Pro Tour Dominaria. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Cheon and Luis Scott Vargas. And it's time for the finals. In the feature match area from Portugal, Gonçalo Pinto. He is playing red, black, aggro. Take a look at Gonçalo. Here's a 50 coming in. On the other side of the table, Wyatt Darby from the United States. He decided, you know what? I don't need any swamps. I don't need any black mana whatsoever. He is on mono red. Luis, kick us off with how you view this matchup from a big picture perspective. We saw it in the semis.
Wyatt is certainly the aggressor here. He's got, well, I actually don't want to say more one-drops because he only has 3 Bomat Couriers, but he's got Earthshaker Kenras, which are one of the more aggressive cards. And we saw Kenra do a lot of good work, the Eternalize mode especially because the games tend to go long. And he's going to hope that Gonçalo draws some, lands that enter the battlefield tapped, which, in fact, he did. That is not a turn-1 Bomat Courier.
That's right. And take a look at this here, Paul. We did see a mulligan from Pinto in the early stages and an early development here, already missing land drops.
Yeah, Wyatt just quickly firing out the gates. The problem with, some people talk about the issue with playing mono red is, well, you have to play Earthshaker, Kenra, and Bomat Courier, and when you do, you kind of lose to Goblin Chainwhirler. Well, that's not really the case. If you're aggressive and you're on the play, Earthshaker Kenra is still going to get in for a few points of damage, and like Luis alluded to, those points add up, and then the late game, it's a mana sink. You Eternalize, and it generally will be the biggest creature on the battlefield. And another big advantage of playing the mono red deck, as we saw in the last match, is Hazoret. You have 4 copies of Hazoret with a lower mana curve, and the red-black deck doesn't actually have a clean way to get rid of that Hazoret once it's on the battlefield.
You can see the land drop now from Gonçalo. He does play a Heart of Kirin, though doesn't look like it's going to do much on the board state right now, and his life total is still on the way down. Another 3 damage hits him, and the curve out looking beautiful here for Wyatt Darby as he finishes 3 mana with, that's right, Goblin Chainwhirler. This is the card of the tournament, all over the top 8, and you can see that Bomat Courier has now hit the bin. Was there a land off the top for Pinto?
I do not think so.
There was not.
Oh, no. Take a look at the cards in hand. Well, he can cast some things. He's got a Braid, Soulscar Mage, and Cut to Ribbons that are all castable.
I think we're going to see some burn going to the face here because Wyatt's missing his 4th land drop with multiple 4s in hand, but he's got that Soulscar Mage, Lightning Strike, and Shock. I bet the Chainwhirler gets hit by an Abrade, and then Wyatt might just go to the face for 5-7 extra points with the Prowess triggers.
He's got to get these cards out of his hand, and he has certainly shown no fear in going upstairs with burn spells over the course of the top 8, though it looks like he's decided not to here.
Yeah, he's going to keep them in hand just in case Pinto plays a blocker, but no blockers are forthcoming.
Of course, it's always really important to understand when the board state is the thing that you need to manage to keep getting damage in with your creatures, and when it's time to change gears and start firing those burn spells at the player instead. Another missed land drop here for Gonçalo. He plays Soulscar Mage and passes the turn back. Don't think he has any other castable spells, so this is going to be a green light for Wyatt Darby.
And if you notice, Darby is actually kind of in the tank right now because he has access to Shock, which you would think is the card that you use against the Soulscar Mage. However, Gonçalo Pinto has multiple copies of Magma Spray in his deck. So if he uses the Shock and Gonçalo has a Magma Spray, then with the Prowess trigger, it would actually survive the Shock. So it looks like Wyatt's deciding to play Lightning Strike there instead.
He shocked upstairs this time. End step. So no trigger there from the Soulscar Mage, but he's got him down to 8.
Yeah, he wanted to use that shock because he just wanted to use all the mana that he had available to him. Because if you look at his hand, he's got all 4 drops. So he really won't have another opportunity or a good opportunity to use that shock unless he draws 2 lands in a row.
Game's over. That's going to be game number 1 going to Wyatt Darby. A mulligan to 6 for Gonçalo Pinto and a stumble on mana. And, well, it's one of the reasons that you bring mono red to a tournament is to punish your opponents for stumbling. So a quick game 1, and as I mentioned at the onset, this is not the time to go make a sandwich. We could have a very quick finals here. Mono red aggro versus red black aggro. Chainwhirlers everywhere. We're going to come back with game number 2 right after these messages.
Doesn't matter if you're from Japan or Switzerland or South Africa. I travel a lot. One of my joys in life is traveling. I go all around the world, and everywhere I go, every corner of the earth, there are Magic players. And no matter what city I go to, I go and visit a game store, I sit down, play some games, meet some people, and we are speaking the same language together and have the same kind of stories. What else is like that?
To the feature match area here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon, and we are in the finals. Boy, if you stepped away for even a second, you would have missed game number 1. And this is not getting any better for Gonçalo Pinto. He is mulliganing to 5 here in game number 2. He's going to be on the play, and you can see the look on his face, not going how he hoped it would. Meanwhile, Wyatt Darby says, yeah, you can take a look at my hand, Mr. Spotter.
It's
no
great.
problem.
Wyatt Darby looks the way he's looked basically this entire top 8, which is just unruffled.
Very much so.
His presence has actually been really impressive.
Agreed.
It's kind of funny that, you know, we're in the booth. We're not like down on the floor talking to the players, but you do pick up on things, and it just feels like he's just playing games of Magic, which is exactly what we always tell people. Kind of doesn't matter what the situation is. You're supposed to just play your best game of Magic.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Luis, I was down in the feature match area for his quarterfinal match, and exact same vibe from being down there. He is chill. He is just taking it one step at a time, and you'll see him pause at opportune moments and really think through his plans. He's not doing anything hasty. Let's see if we've got a 5-card keeper. Yeah, that's absolutely a keep here for Pinto. You can see he's snapped that one off, and whoop, to the bottom, though, with his scry. Now, the question is that a hand that has the tools to actually win a game of Magic here?
Yeah, for sure. Turn 1, Soulscar Mage, and turn 2, carry Zev. If Gonçalo can rattle off a couple removal spells and clear the path, or maybe just a couple lands and just play a Glorybringer, then he would be doing something pretty big.
Okay, well, Soulscar Mage is for both players on turn 1. Carry Zev is going to hit the battlefield for Pinto as he passes the turn back to Darby. No attacks. 1-2's just kind of staring at each other. Land number 2 for Darby, and he does have a Braid and Lightning Strike at the ready.
Yeah, and Darby does have a handful of cards, but it looks like he might be stuck on 2. He's going to take a look, or does he have a mountain as well?
An attack for 2.
Never mind. Just looking at all the different potential ways that Gonçalo can get out of this.
Cut to Ribbons was the draw step for Pinto, meaning that he does have an option to kill Soulscar Mage if he would like. Looks like he's going to choose not to and just pass the turn back for this time. He's not that worried about the Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, I think he wants to wait at least one turn to see if Darby plays out a Goblin Chainwhirler, because that would be a much better target for those Cut to Ribbons.
Let's see if that's what happens here. A Chainwhirler would be pretty nice here, and there it is. And Luis, let's not forget about that interaction there with the Soulscar Mage either. This is one of the draws for the Chainwhirler. One of the many draws, honestly.
Well, that top deck of a land wasn't too bad, because Cut to Ribbons taking care of the Chainwhirler, and then Glorybringer with 4 lands in play. You're kind of in the spot where if you draw a land, you can play Glorybringer, and that's great. And if you draw a spell, that's probably pretty good too. There aren't that many dead draws in Gonçalo's deck.
Yeah, this is actually a reasonable situation. So if Wyatt does play out the Hazoret in his hand, then yeah, if Gonçalo draws the land, he can use that Glorybringer.
And yes, because of the Soulscar Mage, that means the Glorybringer's trigger will actually give Hazoret 4 -1/-1 counters.
Yeah, the Soulscar Mage clinging to life here at just an 0-1 with that counter on it. Though it looks like Wyatt is going to take advantage of the opening here and actually use Lightning Strike to finish it off and even get in for extra damage with his own Soulscar Mage.
I think Gonçalo actually wants a land. That's the most ideal draw for me here.
He did not find one. Instead, he found a Scrap Heap Scrounger.
I feel like every single time in this top 8 that someone needs to draw a land, they always draw Scrap Heap Scrounger.
I agree. Yeah, that happened to Marcio, which is Gonçalo's testing partner and very good friend as well as countryman. And here it is, Hazoret the Fervent on the battlefield. Only 1 card left for Wyatt Darby, and he knows how to play this game. Send him into the red zone. No blocks possible because of the Scrounger, and this one could be over next turn. Another Scrounger. Luis Scott Vargas with the call there, and boom, 2-0 for Wyatt Darby from the United States. This is a super fast finals, especially if Wyatt ends up winning game number 3. That's going to be one of the quickest finals since I've been doing coverage, I'll tell you that. Already we're so far ahead of the curve. Now, it's worth noting that we are now transitioning from our pre-sideboarded games to our post-sideboarded games. Now that means that for the next 1, 2, or 3 games, however it ends up playing out, the players are going to have full access to their sideboard. They also have their opponent's deck list. And as you guys know, being on testing teams, you're going to have access to information that your testing partners will have provided for you as well. Let's take a look at the sideboards from our 2 players and get your take on it. Paul, what do you think of Gonçalo Pinto's sideboard? He certainly has more options after having reached into black as well.
Yeah, I imagine he's going to probably board out his Bowmat Couriers, because oftentimes you just want to make sure like your deck is as Goblin Chainwhirler proof as possible. So I fully expect him to bring in the removal spells, Chandra's Defeat, a Braid, Ether Sphere Harvester, and then I can also see him go further up the curve with the Glorybringers and possibly even the Siege Gangs. We've seen him do that before in his matchup against Marcio, and I'm not 100% sure on that. This matchup is slightly different because he's playing against straight mono red, but it still seems like a very good card as it's able to flood the board, and it's also another way to at least stem the bleeding from a Hazoret attacking you. It gives you a lot of chump blocks, and then you can maybe finish off the game with your creatures with evasion.
Other sideboard plan here for Wyatt Darby. Luis, we talked about this one in his semifinal match. Being mono-red, he has fewer options to choose from, but what do you expect to see?
Just like before, bring in Chandra's Defeat, Glorybringer, and Ether Sphere Harvester, trimming his copies of Chandra's and Beaumont Couriers and Shock. I like Wyatt's plan. I think that even though he has fewer options, this is not one of the matchups that hurts. It is much better to be on the red-black plan instead of mono-red against a control deck, because Duress is better than any red sideboard card. But in the head-to-head, I'd rather just all my lands come into play untapped. Like, we could have seen that last game. Gonçalo draw a Canyon Slough as his 5th land, and then just be in complete disarray, not able to cast his Glorybringer. That's just not going to happen to Wyatt. If he draws a land, it's just coming into play on tap.
Yeah, there is no black card that Gonçalo has in his sideboard where you're like, oh, this is the card that you want for this matchup. There is 0. So, kind of the better black cards that exist in Standard do cost double black, so it's not really like a free option for Gonçalo here. And I did see Wyatt choose to make interesting decisions with his sideboarding. I think you will see kind of a mix-up based on player draw. For example, I believe he boarded out Earthshaker Kenra when he was on the draw, but kept him in on the play.
Oh, interesting.
So I can see him do something similar here as well.
Well, Gonçalo Pinto is going to have to take a very deep breath and hope that that sideboard game plan can bring him some success here, because it has been a rough ride in the finals thus far. He's mulliganed 3 times already in 2 games and has really just been run over by the mono red deck of Wyatt, Darby. Wyatt now knows he's close. Doesn't need a whole lot to go right. Just win a game of Magic out of the next 3, and he's going to be holding that trophy at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think you've seen just kind of the natural evolution of this red-black deck, It kind of started out as mono-red. Then we added some black for disintegration, for, that removal effect, different angles of attack. And then all the red-black decks have been trying to go over the top of each other, slowing themselves down, adding Glorybringers. We've seen decks with Karn. And, while those decks are maybe better in the red-black head-to-head, a lot of those cards are really clunky. Oftentimes, we've seen the red-black deck just lose with multiple cards in hand that they just couldn't get out of their hands.
Which Chainwhirler deck will we see win this tournament? Could be mono red, could be red with a little bit of black. That's Wyatt Darby right there.
Cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, he looks really chill. I mean, he's feeling it. It's more of a methodology than anything, but I have been impressed by that.
I think that Wyatt Darby is the most likely to win because he's up 2 games to 0.
Thank you, Luis.
That's some expert commentary.
Hard-hitting stuff over there from the side of the booth. All right, players taking a look at their opening hands here for game number 3.
Lands and spells? Crazy.
Lands and spells for Darby. And they've both kept. All right, we get a fair fight this time, and let's see if Gonçalo can do a little better than those first 2 games to try to get on the board. Land number 2, and, well, not too bad. He's got a Scrap Heap Scrounger, so 3 power on the board already. Nothing from Darby? What do you got?
Oh, it looks like he does have, is that Earthshaker Kenra?
It is, and he chose not to play it, leaving up a Braid and Lightning Strike, just to potentially kill the Scrap Heap, but also I think just play around Goblin Chainwhirler.
He chooses to use the Lightning Strike rather than the Abrade on the Scrounger here.
Yeah, and that makes sense because Abrade does allow you to have an answer to cards like both Heart of Kirin and Aethersphere Harvester, and of course the Lightning Strike does not deal with those.
Goblin Chainwhirler on turn 3 from Gonçalo Pinto, though, means he went 2-drop into 3-drop. And he's going to force Wyatt Darby to have an answer again.
And Wyatt's missing a land drop here. So
Ooh.
The shoe could be on the other foot here as Wyatt is forced into the role, which I don't think he wants to be in, which is just control, trying to remove Gonçalo's threats one by one.
Could have been worse for Wyatt Darby there. It is Heart of Kirin, no other creatures on the board currently, and there's land number 3, so perhaps drawing his way out of that stumble.
Ooh, you're going to see an interesting interaction coming up. I believe Gonçalo has a Pia Nalar in hand, but I think Wyatt has a removal spell in hand. And Pia Nalar, when it comes into play, it makes a Thopter, but that trigger goes on the stack. So if Wyatt uses a removal spell on the Pia prior to the Thopter entering the battlefield, Gonçalo will not be able to crew his Heart of Kirin.
So let's see if that's what happens here, because we see Soulscar Mage.
Oh, okay, never mind. There was a Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Right, the Scrounger does get to eat the Chainwhirler that died to the Abrade.
I wanted to feel so smart, too.
Yeah,
You are smart.
That's a really interesting interaction that happened here.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Luis.
Wait, it's on the stack at Resolve. Paul, I don't understand.
Should he kill it?
No. Now, he did have the opportunity, if he wanted to use that interaction at least somewhat to force it so that the Scrounger couldn't get in the red zone. He chose not to.
And here, actually, Wyatt's paying for his choice of using a Braid instead of the second Lightning Strike, because now he's got a Lightning Strike in hand, and he can't kill Heart of Kieran, though he can put 3 -1/-1 counters on it. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to steal your cool interaction, Thunder. Is there any other?
I'm good. I'm good.
The prowess trigger on that Soulscar Mage is a very cool interaction that helps it get +1, so it's able to take down the Scrappy Scrounger in
Wow,
combat.
I'm sorry, Paul. I don't know why we dragged you into this.
Are we done with this?
There it is. Lightning Strike to shrink down Heart of Kieran and turn it into just a 1/1. A bit of a liability, perhaps, as crewing it up and attacking for 1 looks pretty bad.
It's not going to be a choice that Gonçalo's making too often, but I don't know that it would stoop to a liability. I guess it could lead him down a path he doesn't want to be in.
Sure.
Gonçalo's still very far ahead, though. Despite all that, Wyatt's deck is just not really designed to play from behind, and that's what he's been doing the whole game.
Yeah, so as you can see, the attacks are coming in pretty free here. He's going to cast the Goblin Chainwhirler, crew up the Heart of Kieran. And that's going to be 5 damage, knocking Wyatt Darby down to 12. How does he even come back from this? There's just really no way, right?
Yeah, this is just... Gonçalo has just too dominating of a board presence. I think traditionally, normally the way Wyatt would be able to come back or be able to win on the draw is with an aggressive draw followed by Hazoret the Fervent, but we just didn't see that here. He stumbled. He was kind of playing the role as the control player, but I believe that the red-black aggro deck just kind of has a more robust late game plan.
What about Rekindling Phoenix here? If Gonçalo doesn't have an answer for it, that's a bit of a stop sign, is it not?
I think it's going to eat a Braid plus Shock, and then that'll open the door for Gonçalo to attack for not lethal, but a good chunk of Wyatt's life total, at which point Wyatt's second Phoenix I don't think will do the trick.
Yeah, it looks like Gonçalo Pinto just had the answers there for the Phoenix, and he says, fine, I'll take a 2-for-1 as long as it gets me in for a whole bunch of damage. Also, he did remember at the last minute to bring back that Scrap Heap Scrounger to get in that 1 additional point with the Heart of Kieran.
And with Pia Nillar's ability here, he's just going to make the Phoenix not block and attack for lethal.
Yeah, easy game there for Gonçalo Pinto. He says, this wasn't so hard.
If I start with 7 cards.
Yeah, why didn't I do this before? That is game number 3 going to Gonçalo Pinto from Portugal with the red-black aggro deck, and stage 1 complete for him. He got ran over in the first 2 games. Now he's starting his comeback. Nice to get an easy one there for Gonçalo.
Yeah, we've seen kind of both players stumble a bit in their losses. This time around, Gonçalo did have an excellent start, but Wyatt just couldn't find the 3rd land in time to put up a good enough fight.
One of the things you notice with these red decks is they actually get punished pretty hard for missing land drops. This isn't like, the old 20 land red decks that were all 1 drops where if you got stuck on 2, or like Modern Burn right now, you get stuck on 2 or 3 lands, you're probably going to win. These decks have powerful 4s. Hazoret punishes you if you don't empty your hand. You have cards like Heart of Kieran, Scrap Heap Scrounger that are pretty resource intensive with like crew costs and cost to bring it back. So these decks really don't want to miss their 3rd land drop. It's actually really bad for them if they do.
Yeah, we've just seen so many games where the red-black player is either stuck on 3 and can't play their Chandra, or stuck on 4 and can't play their Glorybringer, which is why I think most decks have kind of continued to add more and more lands to their deck, and I think the standard is now 25 lands in those red-black decks.
Yeah, one of the other standards that we've seen emerge here at the Pro Tour is that 3-drop of choice Goblin Chainwhirler, and this thing, boy, it has been everywhere in the late stages, day 2, and of course the top 8 of the tournament. 7 of the 8 decks in our top 8 running Goblin Chainwhirler, and just seems to fit perfectly. Upon reading it, it looks like a powerful spell, but perhaps not one that would dominate. But boy, it really does do a great job putting a number on some of the strategies that you'll see cards like the cheap aggressive threats that we saw come out of the deck now that were out of sideboards, and cards like Llanowar Elves and that type of thing can just get mowed down by this Chainwhirler.
Yeah, it's really keeping a lot of those types of effects in check. And it's also a nice comeback card, too. If you're on the draw and you have that turn 3 Chainwhirler, if your opponent started out, with the Kenra and the Bomat Courier, this can get you back in the game. But yeah, this card pretty much does it all right now.
A little bit of a throwback card at this point is Earthshaker Kenra, but it's on the comeback. Wyatt Darby's made it look pretty darn good here in the top 8. It has fallen out of favor for the most part in Standard. Luis, talk to us about why you would want to play Earthshaker Kenra, or perhaps why some people have stopped.
The more aggressive decks are interested in playing it because they still do want to curve out, maybe force a Winding Constrictor or something along those lines to not block, get in some damage, and then it gives you a play on 6 mana. The reason the red-black decks don't want it is, first of all, they're less aggressive. Second of all, they don't need more 6 mana plays. They've got a good enough high end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and honestly, mono red just doesn't have access to any other 2s, really. You have Earthshaker Kenra and Kari Zev as pretty much the only options, whereas the red-black deck, they can play Heart of Kirin.
Absolutely. Looks like we're just about ready to head into game number 4, and we are underway. This one could be the decider for the Pro Tour. It's all up to Gonçalo Pinto to try to defeat Wyatt Darby and force a game 5, else this thing's done. And Darby's going to hoist that trophy. He's got the 1-drop on the play, Soulscar Mage, but there's one on the other side of the battlefield now too.
This looks like a good Rekindling Phoenix game. Wyatt has a Phoenix on 4, and Gonçalo has a bunch of removal spells, but he is going to run into a problem dealing with Phoenix, though drawing that Chainwhirler does always help. The Chainwhirler is always a welcome sight.
Yeah, it's going to do a lot of work, especially if that Soulscar Mage does survive on Gonçalo's side, as it will put -1/-1 counters on all of Wyatt's creatures.
Pretty nice curve out here for Darby. He has Aethersphere Harvester on 3 after playing Soulscar Mage on 1 and Earthshaker Kenra on turn number 2. He gets to just slam in for 4 damage here, knocking Pinto down to 13 before passing the turn. Of course, Aethersphere Harvester making it difficult to race, so Gonçalo very much incentivized to try to play a more controlling game here if possible.
And that is a nice play, because even though that Chainwhirler is going to come down and kind of, decimate Wyatt's board, the Aethersphere Harvester does avoid any sort of interaction there because it's not a creature right now. And there's a good chance Wyatt's going to be able to attack. And if he gets 2 3-point drains, 6-point life swings off that lifelink off Harvester, that's really hard to race.
Soulscar Mage with the -1/-1 counter has lost the ability to crew the Aethersphere Harvester. And there it is. Luis, you mentioned this right at the beginning. Rekindling Phoenix, you said this is going to be good this game because Gonçalo doesn't have a clean answer for it.
Yeah, it looks like we're just in just a straight-up racing situation here. Gonçalo needs to use 2 removal spells to deal with that Rekindling Phoenix, but he drew an excellent card here in Abrade, which will allow him to deal with the Aethersphere Harvester and effectively allow him to race, because currently it looked like Wyatt was going to be ahead with the 6-point life swings every time you attack with the Aethersphere Harvester.
So are we going to see him combine Shock plus Abrade to permanently get rid of that Phoenix?
It's tough to tell. If he's looking to just be in a racing situation, if he's ahead, which currently looks like he isn't, but if he were, he could have considered using the Abrade on the Aethersphere Harvester.
Just kill the Harvester.
Yeah, and you would use Cut to turn the Phoenix into an elemental, and then Shock to finish off the elemental. So those are basically Gonçalo's 2 lines here. He can use Abrade on the Harvester or a double removal spell on the Phoenix. Splitting the difference and using 1 removal spell on the Phoenix is not going to work out quite as well.
Right. That is poor sequencing, to say the least. So let's see which way that Gonçalo decides to go. He's going to be evaluating this board state based on the next few turns and how he sees the race going.
So it looks like he's going to go after the Harvester, because if he was going to use the Cut to Ribbons play, he would cast it pre-combat to enable prowess on his Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, and Luis, would you use the Abrade now to get it for the extra point of damage, or do you want Wyatt to play out a creature to crew the Aethersphere Harvester and attack?
It's really close. One of the advantages of waiting is that Wyatt may play a spell to make it so Soulscar Mage gets +1/+1, and then use it to crew and tap down additional resources. On the other hand, an extra point can really matter. We saw that in Gonçalo's match against Marcio.
Right.
Especially a guaranteed extra point. Hard to leave that on the table when you don't know exactly what Wyatt might be up to the next turn.
I think if Wyatt chump blocks, I'm actually more inclined to use the Abrade now.
He took it. Pinto decided not to use it, so he's going to just play a Soulscar Mage, pass the turn back.
Yeah, that Abrade was a critical draw.
Carry Zev in hand for Wyatt Darby, as well as an Earthshaker Kenra.
Because it's very easy to imagine Wyatt being led down a path where he ends up committing to this Harvester plan and then dies on the backswing to a flurry of removal spells.
Feels like Wyatt is evaluating exactly that right now. He's going to play the Kenra and say, your Soulscar Mage may not block this turn.
Yeah, so...
He just said it. He said, what if you hit this with the Braid? He's certainly aware of the possibilities for Pinto here.
Yeah, and Wyatt can even play the Kari Zev and attack for 9 if he attacks with the Phoenix, the Earthshaker Kenra, and the Aethersphere Harvester, leaving back the Soulscar Mage to block. But that is not lethal, and that puts Wyatt dead to basically everything.
Wyatt, I think, is quite aware of this Abrade, and I don't think he's going to put himself in a spot where he dies to an opposing Abrade.
Played Carry Zev.
Yeah. Is it crazy to just consider just passing here? If
He
you
just
think
crewed
he's
up
on
the
a Braid?
Aethersphere Harvester.
It's interesting. You don't have great blocks on the Chainwhirler, but the problem is if you put Phoenix in front of anything and then Gonçalo has an additional burn spell, then you end up losing it all. I like attacking with the Phoenix and the Harvester. Gonçalo may have been able to prompt an energy spending.
You're supposed
there.
to say no blocks.
But there's not that many other cards that use energy. I don't think that is ultimately going to matter a whole lot.
Okay. And here's Cut to take down
And this is
one
it.
blocker, Shock to take down the last blocker, and send everything into the red zone for Gonçalo Pinto as he ties things up 2 games apiece. And we're going to get a game 5. Now, they are happening quickly, but we're getting the maximum number of games here in the finals. It's all going to come down to one game to see who decides or who wins the Pro Tour here on Pro Tour Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're just tuning in, you're not going to want to go anywhere. We've got Mono Red versus Red Black here in Richmond. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Cheon and Luis Scott Vargas, and we're in the finals. There's a trophy sitting in the middle of the feature match area there. In fact, it's being photographed at the moment, and one of our players is going to get their name on that trophy, and they get the top part to take home as their prize. That's not all they get. Get a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of pro points and
Get to play at Worlds?
Worlds, Platinum, all of it. Let's take a look at Rekindling Phoenix, a card that has popped up in the feature match area here in the top 8 numerous times. Paul, I think it's hard to kill, man.
Yeah, especially, you know, in our current field, just full of just red decks or red-black decks, we've often seen people having to use multiple removal spells to deal with just Rekindling Phoenix. There's just no good way to exile this creature. We've even seen Takemura actually play main deck Vraska's Contempt as an additional answer to Rekindling Phoenix. So this card does a lot of work, and you know, I've even seen people use this defensively, right? You know, you can use it to trade with a card, and they still have to use a removal spell. So at the end of the day, this will almost always be a 2-for-1.
I like this card because it is actually fairly easy to assemble 2 removal spells that get the job done, but it's the question of, do you want to use 2 removal spells to get that job?
And they always have the second Phoenix.
Yeah, of course
You're
they
like,
do.
I use my 2 lightning strikes. Oh, great. Oh, another Phoenix. Great.
Card is very difficult to beat, and like you said, can play defense when needed as well, though it does excel at attacking in the air for quite a bit of damage with 4. Decks are presented. Players are going to be examining their opening hands, and it's going to be one game to see who our champion for Pro Tour Dominaria is. Is it going to be Gonçalo Pinto from Portugal? He defeated his best friend Marcio Carvalho in the semis to get here, or Wyatt Darby from the United States on Mono Red. Looks like Wyatt sent back that first hand.
Gonçalo's hand looked quite good to me. Scrap Heap Scrounger, Aethersphere Harvester, PNLR, and Siege Gang Commander at the high end with 3 lands. Is that a Pro Tour winning hand? It's got to be a Pro Tour favorite hand at this point when you're with your opponent mulliganing.
Absolutely. Gonçalo is in position here to pull off the reverse sweep as he was down 0-2. I don't even know how much better like certain sideboard cards are, but whenever I just see multiple copies of them in my opening hand, I'm like, yeah, I'm keeping this no matter what. It's got to be good, or I just didn't know how to sideboard.
Is this a keeper?
Think so.
This looks solid to me.
And he has kept it.
So if
Put a Phoenix on
Wyatt
the
can
bottom.
find his third land, his hand looks quite good as well.
He found a 1-drop. Silscar Mage off the top of the library. Passes the turn. Excuse me. That was Pinto that found the 1-drop. Wyatt Darby has no plays for the first 2 turns of the game, at least thus far. Does he have something? Lightning Strike to kill this? He does.
And Gonçalo is going to curve out beautifully after drawing that Soulscar Mage. He's got his Scrap Heap Scrounger followed by the Aethersphere Harvester.
Ooh, wonder to that 3-drop.
And a Pia Nalar.
That is one way to do it. But this is a nice way to fight back.
One thing,
Goblin Chainwhirler.
yeah, Gonçalo is missing is he doesn't have any removal of his own. He's got all creatures, so he can't remove the Chainwhirler, so he's not gonna be able to tackle the Scrounger this turn. And that Rekindling Phoenix that Wyatt is about to play is gonna go uncontested for now.
The Aethersphere Harvester is pretty good. Sizes up very well against the Rekindling Phoenix, but of course you are playing against the red deck, so if you do choose to block, very likely that they will have a spell to finish off the Aethersphere Harvester.
That's right. And of course, with all the Abrades running around, a card like Aethersphere Harvester isn't necessarily staying on the battlefield.
Ooh, but the burn spell, if you will, in Wyatt's hand is a Chandra's Defeat, which you
Just
cannot
tearing
use
down 2
on the
artifacts.
Aethersphere Harvester.
This is potentially a big turn. Wyatt could have run the bluff, attack with the Chainwhirler into the Harvester with nothing.
Right.
That's a rough one to do, but you know, if it works out, you look really good.
I mean, it's pretty hard to block there, right?
Yeah, but can you imagine throwing away a Chainwhirler in the finals of the Pro Tour? That is a gutsy maneuver.
Gonçalo Pinto, for the turn, drew a copy of Goblin Chainwhirler of his own.
Oh, and that is great. Now Gonçalo can attack, and if Wyatt chooses to block, Gonçalo can then play the Chainwhirler to finish off the Elemental token.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fairly common play and one that would prompt me to not want to block if I were Wyatt here.
Right. But it's still got to feel great. You get that nice 6-point life swing here.
And Darby's having none of it. He says, I've seen that trick before. I'm just going to take the hit. And he's not going to be happy about that. It is a 6-point life swing, as Luis described earlier, but maintaining that Phoenix, especially demanding that your opponent use at least 2 spells on it, is of great importance. Here's Pia Nalar now for Gonçalo. This has been a nice curve. He went 1, 2, 3, 3.
And Wyatt's really going to need to draw a removal spell. He currently has Chandra's Defeat, which is just not going to line up well against Aethersphere Harvester or the Siege Gang Commander, which could come down next turn.
Well, given that Gonçalo needs his 5th land, he's probably drawing a Scrounger.
Yeah, well, if history is any indication.
Okay, Wyatt Darby's going to kick things off with an attack for 4. Wyatt is in a very stressful situation here as he started out 2-0. I mean, things were looking really good for Wyatt Darby to just be our Pro Tour champion. And the last 2 games have not gone his way. And now he's facing down a pretty intimidating board. And Gonçalo Pinto is perhaps poised to finish the 3 games in a row comeback to win the Pro Tour.
Yeah, this Aethersphere Harvester has now gained Gonçalo 6 life. Huge
And
when they're both
look
racing.
at this, Rekindling Phoenix now. This curve out for Pinto has been fantastic. And we saw there that Wyatt Darby was forced to leave a lot of mana unused that turn. His draw step, Carry Zev, Skyship Raider, that's not the kind of card that he wants to see at this late juncture.
You really needed to find a Chainwhirler there, because then he could kill Phoenix with Chandra's Defeat, Chainwhirler away the Elemental, the Thopter token, and then put 2 -1/-1 counters on Scrap Heap and Pia.
Or even in a braid to deal with that Aethersphere Harvester. And then I think at this point, he might need to slow it down and just use that Phoenix on defense. And at this point, you're so far behind, you might have to just hope that they don't have it.
Yeah, this one is starting to really slip away from Wyatt Darby. Gonçalo Pinto from Portugal, moving ever closer to hoisting that Pro Tour trophy. He's got his teammates and friends rooting for him on the sidelines right now. Phoenix runs into other Phoenix.
This is going to be brutal.
Get triggers here for their elemental tokens. And is this Goblin Chainwhirler? Oh my goodness sakes. Kill your elemental. That means your Phoenix isn't coming back. Gonçalo will be getting his.
Well, Wyatt does have a Chandra's defeat, which he can use on the token.
He may need to, but he's got so many problems. One Chandra's defeat does not get him out of this.
There's a chance he may have wanted to wait and see if he could draw his own Chainwhirler, but I think he's in a lot of trouble either way.
Yeah, he preferred to leave himself open to be able to cast a 5-drop. Let's see what he drew for the turn, but honestly,
Hazoret?
It is Hazoret the Fervent. Now, how does that change things?
Well, he's still getting pressured very heavily by these flyers. The combination of both the Aethersphere Harvester and the Thopter, along with Pia Nalar's ability to pump artifact creatures, means that Wyatt is on a 2-turn clock currently.
Can Wyatt take the race to Gonçalo? It just doesn't feel like it from this position, right?
Yeah, it seems very difficult. That Aethersphere Harvester did a lot of work.
21 life is where Gonçalo Pinto, he's facing mono red, and he's above his starting life total.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, especially since if Gonçalo draws a land, he's going to be able to play a Siege Gang Commander, and that just ends all dreams of Hazoret attacking.
Well, Hazoret's going to make hay while the sun's shining and get in there for 5, but Gonçalo's still at a hefty 16 life. Another 5-drop off the top of the library for Gonçalo. It was Glorybringer.
These Siege Gangs just don't want to be cast.
No.
Never.
These are the shyest Siege Gangs I've ever seen. I'll tell you what, whenever my opponent has them, they're on the battlefield. Still, the question remains, does Gonçalo even need them to win this match?
Yeah, now Gonçalo is just weighing out his options, trying to figure out how exactly he can lose from this situation. I do believe that he's going to go for the 2-turn clock here because he doesn't really have another great play.
And he could just hit for 4, put Wyatt to 5, play 2 Scrap Heap Scroungers if he wants. He could also pump once if he needed to.
Yeah, I like the pumping once. No, I guess it doesn't matter because if the Chandra dies, then you can still get them with the flyers.
Okay, there's Scrap Heap Scrounger number 2. He passed it to turn back to Darby, who needs something miraculous off the top of the library. He is facing lethal damage in the air next turn. Is there anything he can do to find a way through, or is it going to be Gonçalo Pinto running not 1, not 2, but 3 games in a row after facing an 0-2 deficit to take down Pro Tour Dominaria? Wyatt Darby is reviewing his options in the same calm manner he does every single time, but he may be out of options at this point.
Yeah, Wyatt did draw an Abrade, however, which he can't use on the Aethersphere Harvester. Now, if Gonçalo just decides to only attack with the flyers, he will have 1 more turn because Gonçalo has mana to pump the Thopter up to a 3-1, but that's not going to be enough.
Now, does Pinto have a chance to just attack with everything? And by the way, the trend of needing to land or wanting to land but trying a Scrap Heap Scrounger.
He's drawn 2 Scrap Heap Scroungers and a 5-drop.
Yes. He's deep in the tank. Look at the intensity in the feature match area that both players know how much is on the line and how close this game has gotten. He's going to crew up the Aethersphere Harvester, go for the lethal attack. Pinto does not need to do anything as far as pumping goes, but it was a braid off the top of the library to kill the Aethersphere Harvester.
That'll keep Wyatt in for another turn.
He could go to 1.
Yeah, he could either put him to 1 or just play out a few more creatures.
He's going to put him to 1. Wyatt Darby has to find an answer for that Thopter this draw step, or we are done here. Was that a Glorybringer?
That's a Glorybringer.
Oh my goodness.
Did he just draw Glorybringer off the top of the library?
So
Gonçalo's at 11. Is there any way he can swing this around?
So he blocks Hazoret. He takes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep. Glorybringer
Are you
kills,
serious?
Glorybringer kills
Are you
Chainwhirler.
serious right now?
That's 11.
But Hazoret gets blocked. Akari's have
Every-
3,
nothing
Soulscar Mage's 1, Chainwhirler's 3,
11.
Glorybringer's 4.
Did he just
That's 11
top deck
damage.
the Pro Tour
That's 11
Glorybringer
damage.
off the top for Wyatt Darby? He's done the math.
Oh,
he sends it in,
my.
clears the Chainwhirler. All Pinto can do is look at lethal damage. He can't believe that Wyatt Darby just stole the Pro Tour from him.
Oh my God, that was the only card.
You know what they're asking right now is, did he get Ragavan onto the battlefield? But it looked like he did from here.
Finals of the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
he got the Ragavan.
Obviously.
yeah. We exerted, we got the Ragavan.
And
He
Pinto
knew that it was lethal.
can simply look through and do the math. That's all he can do at this point, and the math does not favor him. He looks down at the Siege Gang commander in his hand.
That 5th land nowhere to be found.
So, first you name...
Right, I say Exert, Glorybringer on Chainwhirler, Get Monkey.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, this trigger can still be on the stack at this moment. They are both at the beginning of combat.
And that's going to do it. Wyatt Darby is your Pro Tour Dominaria champion in an unlikely comeback in game number 5. The glory is all his, thanks to Glorybringer. Unbelievable
That was a
finish
top deck. That was a top deck.
for Zaxby's on the last turn, facing down lethal.
It essentially did 7 extra damage.
Yeah.
Oh, man. He went a braid into Glorybringer.
Yep.
And boy, is he happy about it. What a relief for Wyatt Darby. And he is our champion. That is going to do it for our coverage here from the floor. We've got reactions as well as the trophy ceremony coming back for Luis Scott Vargas, Paul Chian, and Marshall Sutcliffe. Send it out of here.
Wow, absolutely incredible top deck champion and Pro Tour champion Wyatt Darby there with the Glorybringer off the top.
What do they call that card again?
Glorybringer.
Glorybringer. Good call. Very nice.
I wanted to know, Simon, you were watching that game with me, if his opponent had made a different attack the turn before, could he have gotten that match?
The problem is he doesn't know about Abrade, right? So you, in retrospect, knowing about the Abrade, then you can maybe find an attack which also includes ground creatures, so that some of the creatures on the other side die and you don't take 11 on the crackback. But this was a completely crazy turn of event. First, the perfect card to stay alive. PR could only pump the Thopter to 3 power instead of 4, surviving on 1 life and then top decking Glorybringer for the win.
Number of times, Simon, just before the final, we talked about how today mana was an issue. Sometimes it was at 3 to 4, sometimes it was at 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and there, Gonçalo Pinto, sitting there with his 4 mana, can't pump any further, can't get his siege.
If he drops Siege Gang, the game is completely over.
Yeah.
He doesn't take any more damage on the ground, just wins the turn after.
So is this an example of how Wyatt kind of got the upper hand on this metagame by running all mountains, saying, you know what, turn 4, they all need to be untapped all the time?
24 lands, all of them untapped. I'm super impressed by that. Absolutely.
So many mountains here in this top 8. Goblin Chainwhirler, certainly the story of the tournament, I think, Simon. How much has that kind of, you mentioned 24 lands in our aggro deck, which is pretty unusual for an aggro deck. How has that kind of shaped how these aggressive decks are being built in the format right now?
Well, it's actually interesting. Back in my time, when I was active, an aggro deck had 19, 20 lands, you know. The curve would often stop at 3, and you were kind of trying to deal the last points of damage with burn spells. Now it's a lot more creature-centric. And actually we're seeing not only creatures, but now Hazoret as a god. We see vehicles, we see planeswalkers. So I think it's a lot more dynamic. And every deck, the control decks, but also the aggro decks, everything moves a little bit closer together. You are forced into very interactive scenarios. And if you ask me, that's a great thing.
Why don't we take a look at the bracket? Because I can hardly believe that we've got the result we have. Like, it's just... You saw Gonçalo Pinto knowing he was about to win. You saw Wyatt Darby knowing he was about to lose. And then you see Wyatt Darby go, is this real? is this enough? And then looking at Gonçalo Pinto when he's trying to work out if he's just had it taken away. Just extraordinary. It says so right there. Wyatt Darby won with mono red aggro. That is just incredible.
If you heard this, Simon, before the tournament, you're like, guess what's going to win? Mono red aggro, what would you have said?
Absolutely not. I would have said, why would you play one toughness creature
Exactly.
in a field full of Chainwhirlers? I'm surprised, I'm impressed. And if you look at Wyatt Darby's progression, not through the tournament, but through the top 8, red-black aggro, he wins. Red-black aggro, own Turtenwald, he wins. Gonçalo Pinto, the third red-black aggro deck. He beat all of them with his mono-red deck.
But what's most interesting about that is if you didn't know the lists, you would assume that the reason for that is that the red-black is a little more mid-rangey and that maybe a mono-red deck is able to go under it with a turn 1 haste creature, Bomat Courier type thing, something again maybe with haste on turn 2, Arncrop Crasher type, cards like that that are going to come in with haste and get the clock pressured. But actually he's winning having sort of been parallel, and he's drawn ahead in the late game. He won with a turn, whatever it was, Glorybringer.
Yes, but I think one card we have to mention here, Hazoret, is still incredibly good. If you can build a deck to make those land drops, to make those early game plays, and then drop a hasty Hazoret on turn 4, that is super scary for anyone. Maybe Blue-White Control has the best answer to it, but especially in these mirror matches, Heart of Kirin doesn't block Hazoret.
So looking forward, you said Control's not dead. You know, we came into this, a lot of people, it was Teferi, 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 and we didn't end up seeing very much of it at all in our top 8. What do you think is the future for Control right now in this meta?
It's really about which removal spells you're going to play, and something that I found interesting is how a lot of these decks actually overpower this 1-for-1 approach. You're removing a threat, you're removing another threat, but then there are these 2-for-1s that you cannot do much against. Eternalize, Chandra, even Hazoret sometimes is problematic. What I really like is Wyatt Darby's tech of just bringing in a few Fight with Fires so that he can kill Lyra, and sometimes, if the opponent plays too many Settle the Wreckages, you burn them out of nowhere.
Another deck that I am interested in, which didn't actually make the top 8, is Kevin Jones, because he went blue-black. And for a long time, he played for the top 8, and so he was very close to being his deck showcased on the Sunday Spotlight. So perhaps where Esper is very controlling, because Kevin Jones was nominally blue-black mid-range, but if you liked your Scarab Gods, you've still got the opportunity to play with those coming into Copenhagen next week, for example.
And there are 2 blue-black decks. There is the blue-black pure control, Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk style, and then Kevin Jones's deck is really a special thing of beauty, actually. The Champion of Wits, just to fuel his late game and to make his control matchup better. I thought that was really impressive. He barely missed out. Really unfortunate with his 2 draws, 2 losses. He was so close to making top 8, but then lost the round 16.
So looking ahead, how much should I fear Goblin Chainwhirler when I'm making my deck choice? I mean, we've seen players out there, they're playing with elves, Llanowar elves, and boarding it out against mono red all the time.
You should be very aware of Goblin Chainwhirler. If you're not playing it yourself, you should have a plan against it. As we've seen, it's possible to play 1 toughness creatures, but if you just disregard Goblin Chainwhirler, you're not going to have a good time.
All right, so the players are ready down in the feature match area where all the matches are now done. It's time to crown a champion, and here comes the award ceremony for Pro Tour Dominaria.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the feature match here at Pro Tour Dominaria in Richmond, Virginia. It's never easy to win a Pro Tour, and boy, did our champion make it interesting down this stretch. It is now time to honor our champion from the United States, Wyatt Darby. Wyatt, you almost gave me a heart attack down this stretch. When you saw that Glorybringer come off the top of the library, how much math did you have to do there?
Enough to realize I needed the monkey in play at the end of it all. Oh man, fairy tale moment, absolutely.
Yeah, you had the two top decks in a row. You were facing down massive pressure. I'll tell you what, that advantage bar was all the way in the wrong direction from your perspective, but it was a braid into Glorybringer in the end.
Yeah, the advantage bar probably did break the screen. I had to guess before I drew the abrade. And I guess if you're going to win a Pro Tour, you have to get lucky. What better time than the finals?
Now, you found yourself up 2-0. And then all of a sudden going into game 5 and looking behind, though, I have to say, all the way from the quarters to the finals, you were one cool customer. Were you putting on a show, or are you really just that chill of a dude?
Oh, constant panic. Constant panic the whole match. When I keep game 3 with 2 lands and just kind of brick on that for a little while, it was starting to set in. I was letting myself think of the ramifications of the third win a little bit too much. So I tried to kind of recollect myself as best as I can. And I don't think I played too poorly. We'll see. Not too much replay.
Well, I'll tell you what, you fooled me, and it was enough to get the job done. Is there anybody that you want to thank that helped get you here?
Oh, yeah, so many friends. Steve Locke for doing lots of testing. Everyone in the Midwest Tournament Updater, you guys sharing with me support. I love you guys. And, teammate Dan Hall, I really just appreciate all the kind words. It's been overwhelming.
Well, congratulations once again to your champion, Wyatt Darby.